Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to this week's edition of Stop, Look, and Listen. I'm your host, LeTroy Gardner. This week, we have a jazz pianist, educator, host of the Playback and the BIPOC podcast hour. We have Miguel Landestoy. Welcome to the show, Miguel.
Thanks for having me on, LeTroy. I appreciate you, bro.
All right, no problem. You said you're in work mode at the moment, so let's see if we can get you out of that. When did you fall in love with the piano?
Oh man, I mean, piano for me has been everything. I was 7 years old, 7 years old. My pops was like, "You want some piano lessons?"
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, "Yeah." And then 4 or 5 months go by, and I'm like, "Pops, was I not supposed to be learning the piano?" And he was like, "See, there it is. You actually want to do it. Okay, so let's get it going." So he encouraged me there, and I started studying classical piano, and I played a bunch of instruments growing up, but piano is the only thing I should ever be paid to do.
Mm-hmm.
No one needs to hear me play the violin. No one wants that.
Okay. Oh wow. So besides the piano, then what's your favorite instrument to listen to?
To listen to? That's an interesting question. I mean, I love a good horn section. For me, the whole jazz um, instrumentation that I like to listen to is usually like a trumpet or a saxophone, bass, drums, and a rhythm section instrument like piano or guitar. So any combination like that, quartet, quintet, I like that kind of tight sound. Also love hip hop. Also love the more electronic stuff. But when it comes to jazz, quartet, quintet, I love that stuff.
Okay, cool. So who's like your ideal collaborator that you would love to hit the stage with or be in the studio with?
Oh, that's interesting, man. I would love to check out what a session with Robert Glasper would look like. He for me is one of those when I was coming up playing the piano, his style was so influential. Bringing it back to the gospel and hip hop place, and making sure that people realized that jazz was capital B black music.
Mm-hmm.
I love to see how he thinks because while I've checked out a bunch of his records, I haven't necessarily seen any behind the scenes stuff, and he's always been one of those kind of innovators and thinkers overall. So I guess I'd have to say Robert Glasper.
Okay, cool. Um, let's go back to the beginning. I just kind of wanted to shift gears a little bit with the line of questioning, but like you're a first generation American. Just talk about your journey and how it's influenced your music.
Yeah, I mean, my parents didn't speak English. I mean, that's kind of a huge. I would even say disadvantage, just difference than
Mm-hmm.
the other kids, right? When you are translating for your parents everywhere they go, at 5, 6, 7 years old, you grow up a little fast. You are in conversations that you probably shouldn't be. So alongside that, you learn all these really wonderful survival skills, work ethic. No one works harder than immigrants because they have to. They literally don't have anything to back up on, right? So my parents, they worked hard all the time. It was a struggle. We didn't have really any money, and my dad was a small business owner. 2008 happened. He lost all that. And we're still kind of grinding. It never stops. So for me, being first generation has always been something I lean back on. I know how to work. I know how to make stuff happen for myself because my parents had to.
Mm-hmm.
And that hopefully bleeds into my artistic endeavors, right? Like podcasting, I'm figuring it out as I go, but I know how to work. As long as I know how to work, I can make it happen.
Right. And it's interesting that you touched on how you had to be around to translate, a lot of things for your parents. It's almost like you were the you were the adult in a lot of cases, and your parents were the roles switched basically, where you were pretty much leading the household in a lot of ways.
Me and my brother. I'm
Uh-huh.
not going to put it all on me. My big brother kind of raised me in English.
Mm-hmm.
because he was here a little before I was. But um, yeah, no, you definitely are just in situations that you shouldn't be as a kid. Also, you get a freedom in weird ways. For example, like the report card situation, or like parent teacher conferences. If you're the one translating, like, you
you
know,
can have C's,
yeah,
but
right.
you be like, see, these are good grades.
Yeah,
I'm I'm passing everything, and
yeah, everything's fine. Yeah,
you can
right.
get that pizza party or whatever you was aiming for.
Exactly. So there were ups and downs with it. I definitely had a bit more freedom in that, like, because I was responsible for a lot of stuff. My folks didn't have a ton of restrictions around like going out or whatever. Like I was paying bills at like 15. So like,
Hmm.
hey, as long as you're taking care of that Comcast bill, like you're an adult. You can go kind of do your own thing. So I wasn't as restricted in my later teenage years for sure.
Right. Um. So just talk about that process of like being a musician professionally. Did you know from the beginning that this is my future, this is my ticket, or did you have another first love?
For a long time, I didn't want to go into music, and the reason was we were poor,
Hmm.
and I didn't really see a way to getting to a place where I could be like helpful to my family and be like a professional musician. And then like, towards the end of like when you're starting to figure out what you want to do you want to go to school? Do you want to go into a trade or whatever? I didn't see another option that I would actually enjoy. And to my parents' credit, they've been so supportive, which is not the norm with first generation households. They want you to be a doctor, they want you to be a lawyer, they want you to
Yeah.
be an engineer, something that will like pay those bills. But my parents were actually always really supportive of me going into music, and that kind of drove me to make sure that I made it a sustainable career.
Hmm.
Um, so like, yes, I am a jazz pianist. I do play and perform all those things, but I also hold down a job at Berklee College of Music, still music, right? I'm still talking about music with students and making sure that they are set with their careers. I also teach. So I have my own private studio students that I'm teaching, which is also another revenue of income. So I had to make it, like all musicians, you kind of have to cobble it together. I had to make it sustainable
Hmm.
with a bunch of different things, and that was only because of the support of my parents.
Right. So how do you balance it all? Because I know, being a creator, like you have to, like you're not wired like normal people that just punch the clock and work a 9 to 5. You
Right.
have to have that space to, be creative and work out the kinks. So how do you balance being a performer and educator, administrator, the whole nine?
Um, am I balancing
Well,
it?
that's the question then.
No. Yeah, that's a good question. No, for me, it's about making sure that my priorities are right. So, for example, like, when I take a gig, I use this triangle, right? The first side of the triangle is like, um, do I need the bread? Do I need the money? Right. Second half of the triangle is it putting me in contact with people that I want to be in contact with that could further my career or things like that.
Hmm.
And then that last bit, the last triangle is it filling me up? Is it making me happy? Right. So if a gig has any two sides of that triangle, I'm taking it.
Okay.
So it's like that's how I make decisions on gigs. Teaching, I just love my students. I make sure that I give them the time, but I also make sure that they're sustainable so that they can learn on their own if they need to. Um, Ideally, you should not need a teacher for too long, right?
Hmm.
They should be able to set you up so that you can go and figure out your own stuff. That's what I try to do for all my students. And then when it comes to the podcast creation stuff like that, that's just late nights, my man.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
That's just I'm just gonna have to grind a little bit more than a few folks, which I've been kind of getting back into that. I kind of burnt myself out um, uh, with not balancing everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm kind of getting back to a place where I have a bit more space to do something like podcast creation and things like that. So, okay, if I want to make this a part of my career, I have to actually um, grind a little bit and work harder than others until I can stop some of the admin stuff and make podcasting a lot more part of my um, artistic practice.
Okay. Yeah. So did you attend Berkeley as a student?
No, I didn't go to Berkeley as a student. I'm from the Boston area, so I've been. It's funny. I've been around Berkeley people my entire life when it comes to just music.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I did my undergrad at UMass Lowell, which is like a state school. It has a pretty good music program. I studied music business there, and then I just worked for 5 or 6 years, just like straight admin stuff, teaching, gigging, the whole thing. And then I went to grad school. I went to New England Conservatory for contemporary improvisation. So learning a bunch of varieties of different types of improvisation and jazz and things like that.
Okay. Cool. So you've described yourself as an educator who teaches the whole person. Could you elaborate on what that means?
Yeah, I mean, the majority of my students aren't going to be professional musicians, right? So I'm not, going to teach them these crazy advanced techniques or theory or whatever, unless they want it, and that's something that they're going to move towards. So for the most part, if you're teaching a person music, it's going to be either a hobby that they hold on to for themselves, or just an experience they had when they were a kid. So how do you make that a sustainable like teaching practice? Like how do you make that something that actually affects a person? So when you're teaching music, you're not just teaching music, you're teaching discipline, you're teaching time management skills, you're teaching appreciation of art, understanding of others, and not to judge others, um, uh, uh, making sure that you have a strong sense of self-esteem, making sure you got some rhythm in your hips so when you go out dancing you don't make a fool of yourself.
Right.
Right. So you, as a music teacher, you're not just teaching music. You are teaching the whole person.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, I have had like maybe 5 or 6 of my students go on to be professional musicians or go to music school and stuff like that. And those students, I flip the switch. Suddenly, we're talking about conservatory stuff. We're making sure you're ready for your auditions. We're making sure you're up to par to be successful as a professional musician. But for
Mm-hmm.
those other students, yes, I want them to be excellent musically, but it comes along with all those other benefits.
Okay. What advice do you have for young musicians, kind of looking to, make their way in the music industry? Because before you answer that, I interviewed Jason Johnson, who's a film director and producer, about a month or so ago, and he was talking about how he doesn't advise those that are trying to make their break in the film industry to go to film school. So, as a music teacher, do
Mhm.
you feel like going to like a Berklee or a music educational school is the best path, or should they just learn on the fly?
That's a great question. Um, it depends. You do not have to be going to music school to be a professional musician, period. So, no, you do not need to go to Berklee, go to NEC, go to any of these fancy music schools to be a professional musician. Um, if you want to be an educated musician,
Hmm.
music school is the way to go. And being an educated musician has its um, pros and cons. The con, money, obviously. Like you had to pay to go do that thing. Hopefully, you got a scholarship, but if you didn't, you still had to pay, right?
Hmm.
Um, the pros are networking. So you are and mentorship, right? You are amongst all the people that are doing the thing that you want to do. You're a lot more likely to then be able to do that thing. Um, so, it's not unheard of for teachers to, ask their students to sub for them. It's not unheard of for teachers to suggest their students for gigs. Um, it's a big networking thing. In Berklee, where I work, it's one of the premier institutions for like popular music. So if you want to
Hmm.
work in the popular music industry, record labels, things, stuff like that, you a lot of people that are already in those companies went here. You have a huge, vast alumni network that can be worth it. But if you just want to go out and play, music is one of the one things where like it is a meritocracy. If you are bad, you're not going to get called. So if you can get good without having to spend the money, and maybe every once in a while you shell out some money for a lesson with a Berklee professor outside of school or whatever, and you can make that connection another way. Don't go to school. No, yeah. But if you really want that whole experience, be an educated musician who understands theory, ear trading, harmony, and you also want to make those immediate networking connections, then that would make school worth it.
Okay, good answer. Um, like let's talk about some of your work. Like you had a recent arrangement of Balumba's piano piece. Like who
Um,
is that? Your
uh,
brother? Who is that? Are you related to?
so yes, technically I am. So you're talking about Buyumba.
But yeah, but say it
Rafael
for me.
Buyumba Landestoy, right?
Okay.
Um, so he is like a great uncle of mine,
Uh huh.
and he wrote a bunch of really cool piano and guitar pieces back in like the 50s. He immigrated from DR to New York and just wrote a bunch of stuff, and also played in like crazy Cuban bands. One was called like the La Quona Boys. So he was like doing all of that. I didn't know that he existed until maybe like 15 years ago, and I found
Hmm.
out, and I was like, "That's pretty crazy." I didn't know that there was someone in our family
Right.
that was a professional musician. So I sought him out, and I sought out his work, and I got a bunch of just PDFs of his music, and I started learning a couple of the pieces and stuff like that. So when I went to grad school, I got to arrange one of his pieces for not just piano, but for like a bigger jazz ensemble, and play it at one of our concerts at the conservatory, which is the first time any one of his pieces was played over there. And that was a really cool experience.
Wow. That sort of has like the thoughts. So say like when Natalie Cole, redid her dad's song, and the music video is like her sitting on the
Yeah,
floor and reminiscing on times with her dad and singing
yeah,
it,
yeah,
or
yeah.
even like in Purple Rain when Prince
Hmm.
was having a mental breakdown and smashing mason jars, and uh, all of a sudden some of his dad's work just comes flying out, and it's
Right.
just like that connection there where it's like, wow, there's someone that I'm related to, and we have these gifts, and now I open a vault of creativity based
Yes.
on you know information that I didn't really know existed. Like, to me, that's crazy.
It was pretty crazy. It was really helpful to put some of my stuff in context. And I'll even say this because I want to be clear. My pops is adopted,
Hmm.
so like I don't have like a blood relation to this cat. We have the same last name. But like my grandma, even though my pops is adopted, obviously she's still my grandma, right? Um, my grandma was his cousin. So like, I never got to like sit down and speak with him or anything like that. Just some exchanges, but even then, knowing that this dude had like this library of like really amazing work. He wrote songs for like Celia Cruz at one point. Like he had a really illustrious career, and just to know that like someone in my vicinity still had that was just super helpful. So yes, Whenever I'm like, I don't know what I should be playing right now, or what I should be practicing, I just go back to some of those pieces because
Hmm.
I'm like, there's stuff to learn here, there's stuff to mine here, and having been born here in the U.S., I don't have as strong a connection to the music of Dominican Republic, even though it's still like in there.
Uh-huh. Is that a mission of yours to tap into that more moving forward?
I'd like to, yeah, I'd like to, because you know I play some of the music I play is kind of weird, or by weird I mean like my folks might not find it as accessible,
Hmm.
um, and it gets kind of old being around your family and then being like, hey, when are you going to play some like salsa, bachata, or merengue, or like when are you going to do this stuff that I like to actually hear, right? So whenever I can incorporate that kind of music or that kind of groove into my stuff,
Hmm.
yeah, I like it because it brings me closer to those people, and if I can elevate it and make it, kind of match my current artistic practice as well, then we're cooking with gas. We're just doing both.
Dr. Todd McLean provides periodontal and dental implant services in 2 convenient locations. They offer over a decade of experience treating patients, and appointments can even be scheduled in the evenings, weekends, or early mornings. Give them a call in Chapel Hill at 919-537-9774 or in Durham at 919-484-8338, or visit them online at gumsandimplants.org.
How do you navigate, I guess, um, like zeroing in on your creative direction and not steering away from it because like maybe on this day your focus is here, but then later on in a week you're just like, wow, I had this amazing idea, I want to create going in this direction. How do you sort of control that?
I am very project based.
Okay.
So for me, if I just asked two of my best friends from like preschool or elementary school, like homies.
Hmm.
I just asked them to send me songs that reminded them of the times we spent on the stoop. Like we used to spend all this time in front of the bodega, just like sitting on stairs doing some quasi illegal shit,
Hmm.
and um, like just talking about all the shit that was going on around us,
Right.
family shit, um, etc. And I asked them to send me songs that reminded them of those times. I'm going to use those songs as models. I'm going to use those songs as models for like a specific set of recordings about that thing. That helps me focus, right? So instead of like, I'm just going to write a 12 song record about whatever, that I can't work that way because I don't know what the vision is. But
Uh-huh.
that hopefully that record that I'll make in the next like couple of years, um, will have that specific focus, and then I can move on to another thing. Another example, like I'm working on writing music for an audio drama that my buddy wrote. He's going to put it out on like Audible and all this other stuff. All right, so like now I have to write music for these specific characters. That's super helpful. Rather than me just like someone saying, "Hey, write some music for this thing." Like I don't
Hmm.
know what you want,
Right.
you know?
Yeah, you have to have some sort of a basis in order to kind of get the ball rolling.
Exactly.
Definitely. Um, just talk about working with Brett Wahlberg on In Between Dreams. How did that come about?
Yeah, man. I mean, Brett is a good friend. I've known Brett for a long time. At one point, we actually lived together, um, and he's just a great collaborator and friend when it comes to the saxophone. We've played a lot of um, duo piano and sax together, and he was putting together a quintet record, the first one he put out in a long time, and we'd been collaborating, and he asked if I wanted to be on it, and I was like, I was honored because I had been playing all of his music for a couple of years at that point, And it's a nice little journal entry. I remember specifically. I remember I was worried that I was going to mess his session up because I didn't feel like up to par with some of the other players. And we did a take, and then he came to me like only he can. And he was like, "Stop playing scared."
Okay.
And I was like, okay, cool. And it's funny, you can actually hear when I stopped playing scared on the record.
And just trusted your God-given abilities.
Right, just trusted my ears and trusted the people around me, and just like hooked into the moment. Because God knows when you're in a recording session or a performance that you're in your head about, sometimes it takes like that slap of just like get out of your head and get into the moment to actually perform well.
Right. Is that something that you experience from time to time? Like, is like imposter syndrome something that is a barrier for you? Like, especially being a first generation American and trying to acclimate yourself in spaces that you're probably the only person with a seat at the table.
Yes. Yes, but yeah, imposter syndrome is always there. Oh my gosh. And you learn how to deal with it. I think for me, the last couple of years, I've been trying to figure out where my head is at. And what I mean by that is like straight mental health wise, what's going on? I've dealt with some depression stuff. I've dealt with some performance anxiety and anxiety stuff. And what I found was that it all related back to undiagnosed ADHD. And now I'm kind of working on that specifically, working on that with medication, working on that in therapy and stuff like that. And you know what I find? All those other things, depression, anxiety, they kind of lift themselves up when you're working on whatever the core issue for you is. For me, it happened to be ADHD. So I'm feeling imposter syndrome less, or I am feeling more confident now. So the imposter syndrome isn't as present, but like when I'm in a low place, yeah, brother, like it's just part of the game. There aren't a ton of brown faces in high places. And it can be difficult to navigate those kind of structures and systems. But right now I'm in a step by step. I'm not trying to jump the gun. I'm just trying to do it right and make sure my shit gets out there.
Okay, great. In what ways do you hope to like serve and uplift like the artistic community when it comes to that platform?
Yeah, I mean, I want to highlight stories. I think stories are storytelling is one of the most powerful things you can do, right? Because anyone can do it. And everyone has access to their own story, their family stories. It's something that's very accessible, right? So for me, I think a project like the BIPOC Artist Hour, which I'm hoping to do a second season of in the near future, of highlighting artists' journeys and what brings them joy, to show people that we are multidimensional folks. We don't just struggle, or we don't just have crazy high success when it comes to sports or hip hop. No, there are these middling careers that we all are in and are dealing with and are trying to figure out. And we also want to sit and smell the roses just like anybody else, all because we've been like disenfranchised for our entire time in the U.S. Doesn't mean that we don't experience joy. In fact, I think Black joy is some of the most amazing joy to witness. Yeah. So it's something I want to put out there, that while we have to address the struggle and everything, we also got to look around and see how well we have, not how well, how we are continuously improving our own communities ourselves.
So are you doing or were you doing both podcasts, BIPOC Podcast Hour and Playback at the same time, or were you doing like a season of one and then focusing on the other? for a
So the
season?
Black Black Artist Hour was a grant funded series. I did one season of it, and I want to do another season of it and have it kind of be an ongoing thing. And Play Black has been going on throughout.
Okay.
Play Black is like my nerdy haven.
Uh huh.
Us black nerds, we got to stick together. Not all of us are amazing at sports, even though I tried. Uh, so, sometimes you got to dig into the anime and dig into comic books and just like find yourself in different stories.
Okay. How do you visualize that intersection between nerdom, culture, art, and blackness, um, and how it influences contemporary art?
I mean, I think our voice is getting out there.
Hmm.
Like um, I think the millennial and Gen Z kind of generation of people of people of color um, had a lot of sway in what popular culture looked like, right?
Hmm.
So, like, I'm trying to think of an example. Um, I'll take anime as an example, right? Like, anime was a kind of like a niche, like white dude thing in like the late 1980s and early 90s, right? But then um, you get a few like specific series out into certain places. For example, I watched like Dragon Ball not in the U.S. but in DR when I was there over the summer. So
Right.
they would have it on weekly every week, and I would just watch Dragon Ball but in Spanish. And then I'd come back and I'd found that a bunch of people who had gone away had come back and kind of like dug into uh, this really simple but interesting story that is something like Dragon Ball, right?
Right.
And um, the reason why I think that is because it is a continuous story. It treats the people that are watching it as people who are intelligent, because um, it's not focusing in on the short attention span of kids. It's focusing in on that. No, kids want stories that actually have an arc and make and have consequences and show growth. And I think us collectively, those kids of color in the late '80s and '90s that grew up finally being exposed to stories that were like engaging and showed character growth and showed um, uh, or respect to us as viewers, um, took that and ran with it. So
Right.
now we expect good storytelling. Bad TV doesn't work no more. Like, because like we don't want it because we grew up with all these amazing stories that respected our intelligence.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, yeah. I always thought of myself growing up as like a cool nerd, and
Oh yeah.
like kind of being able to hang out with the guys that got in trouble, but knowing the limit and not getting to the point where I was also being disciplined like the rest of them, but then sneaking off and going to the AP classes and doing well in them. So it was
Yeah.
kind of like being able to thrive in both environments.
Mhm.
Like, was that pretty much your survival tactics as well?
Yeah, no, that's pretty accurate. I wasn't a very good high school student. I think the undiagnosed ADHD probably has something to do with that because
Hmm.
I later went on. I did school and I did fine in school, right? So I wasn't doing well in classes grades wise, but like I was bright and teachers knew that I was bright. Um, and then on the other end of it, yeah, I grew up in like I mean, um, Framingham, Mass is not like the hood, but if there was to be a hood in Framingham, Mass, that's where I lived.
Hmm.
So I was around a lot of the folks who were struggling financially, mostly BIPOC folks. So everyone knew me from the neighborhood. I was involved in many different things. So like while I wasn't great at sports, I did participate in sports. I ran track and I played football and stuff like that. Uh, and because even though I wasn't good, uh, I was still part of those communities. So like yeah, I definitely was a jack of all trades, just kind of like hanging out. Don't really remember being like bullied or anything like that. But it was one of those things where like, yeah, every once in a while I'd be like kind of jockey white asshole, but like
Mm-hmm.
for the most part people had my back because I wasn't offending nobody.
Right. What's something about you that people will find most surprising?
Most surprising. Um, I can cook really well. Um,
What's your go-to?
oh man, it's got to be my mama's rice and beans, or moro, as we say in DR.
Uh-huh.
Rice, beans, some tostones, some fried cheese, some pickled onions, some like a light salad. I really enjoy cooking. It's one of those things where like what I always say when it comes to cooking is, um, people might not understand my music, but they'll get the food. Like they will
Mm-hmm.
understand that the food is good.
Well, I mean, those are the two universal languages, food and music.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. They're gonna get one or the other out of me. They're
Uh-huh.
gonna figure it out.
All right. What is Miggle Wiggle?
Miggle Wiggle is a very fortunate name that I made for myself in for my Instagram handle.
Uh-huh.
Um, I don't know. I was in like a little like rock band when I was in high school, and one of my boy Cameron, he just made this little song up. He was like, "Do the Miggle Wiggle," and he just like kept on saying it. And eventually, when I made an Instagram, I was like, "Haha, Miggle Wiggle," and it stuck. But everyone I show it to now is like, "That's an amazing name. You should not lose that handle ever." So I'm not.
Yeah.
It's not going anywhere.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I just noticed it when I was looking at my notes for you. I was like, his Instagram handle is Miggle Wiggle. Like, what's the meaning behind that? But what do you see when you look in the mirror?
Ooh. I see a work in progress, and that's all I want. I just want improvement. I don't need to be the best. I don't need to be. I don't want to be the worst. But as long as I'm taking steps forward, um, I'm good.
Okay. All right. Well, with that, what's next for you then?
Um, I'm gonna be writing the music for My Blood the Ink, written by Joanne Cottle. That'll be out with a big launch event in November. So, folks, keep an eye on my handles on that. Play Black is still going on. Every 2 weeks, we post an episode talking about a bunch of different nerdy topics. We recently were just talking about the Acolyte cancellation over at Disney Star Wars, and just catching up on all the summer anime vibes and House of the Dragon, things like that. As well as we interviewed an author about his short story dealing with Nigerian folklore and fantasy, which is pretty cool. And I will be putting out another season of the BIPOC Artist Hours soon, looking to see if I can pitch it to some independent podcast networks and things like that. But for now, that's where we're at. We're just trying to get it lay of the land, get this podcasting thing right.
Okay. All right. So, I mean, we already mentioned Miggle Wiggle. Where else can we find you on social media and your website?
For sure. So my website's first name, last name, .com. So MiguelLandestoy.com. If you want to hit Play Black up, go to Play Black Podcast on TikTok and Instagram. And you can also hit us up just via email at Play Black Podcast and suggest things that you want to hear, because we are all about y'all.
Okay. All right. Miguel, leave us with a parting shot. I mean, I'd say, since your story is a success when it comes to being a first generation American, like, just leave us some parting shots for those that are in a similar boat and are finding it difficult to adjust.
We are some of the hardest working people in this country, and I know that the struggle sucks, but as we are trying to move forward, make sure that you are keeping your priorities straight. What are you willing to do? What will you not compromise on? If you have your priorities straight and you have a little bit of luck, you're going to be just fine. And if you want to hear more of those stories, hit me up, and we'll highlight you and all the other folks in our wonderful community.
All right. Miguel Landestoy, host of The Playback, the BIPOC Podcast Hour, pianist extraordinaire, educator at Berklee College of Music in Boston, anime enthusiast, Miggle Wiggle, chef extraordinaire as well. I mean, I'm based in Miami, so your dishes are speaking my language. Thank you for your time today, sir. You know, keep your head up, keep pushing. Don't let anyone cast any doubt into your gifts, and just continue to excel on this journey of life.
Appreciate you for having me on, brother. Like, this is dope. Great conversation, and thank you for being flexible, because I know we had a few scheduling snafus, but you out here just killing it. So I appreciate you.
Oh man, like I said, like you, my journey is to tell amazing stories that sometimes are swept under the rug, and like that's like my high, is having these conversations. It got me through the pandemic, and it's just a lot of value in these conversations. The networking aspect, just the uplifting experiences that are shared on Stop, Look, and Listen. Like, I gain more from it than anyone. So, I appreciate you. And yeah, we made it happen. So for Stop, Look, and Listen, I'm your host, LeTroy Gardner. See you next week. Peace and blessings.